Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, our debate show Saturday, as we start off your Northeast Streaming Sports Day, Thursday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Mac, and today joining me on the debate show, as he always does, our special guest host, Dr. Paul Semendinger from the blog and now the YouTube Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube show. Start spreading the news. How you doing, Doc?
I'm doing great. It's a little empty without Jack here right now, but I can't wait to have him back next week, and I look forward to debating the issues of the day with you.
Yes, it should be fun. Jack, as I said yesterday, is in Las Vegas for the Crawford-Shawn Porter fight. Crawford 38-0, Shawn Porter 31-3. Shawn Porter is a two-time champion, and Crawford has never fought anybody at this level that has been around as long as Porter has. Porter's only 31 years old, Doc. Very tough fighter. Crawford is supposed to be one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world at 38-0. So it should be interesting, and I can't wait for Jack to come in or when he gets back to give us an update as he goes there for free in Vegas. I didn't have to pay for it with his friend, and he'll be covering that for Boxing News, also working and playing at the same time. You can't beat that, Doc.
Can't beat that. Maybe one of these days we'll have to go to a fight with him and sit ringside.
Yeah, maybe we'll go to a New York fight in Madison Square Garden or something. That would be a lot of fun, right? So as Doc has told you, Jack's not in, but me and Doc are going to kind of try and go at it a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully we stay friends by the end of the show. We don't.
I have no doubt that we will, Doc. Let's do a little bit of baseball news that's come up. Of course, the 40-man rosters have been completed, for the trade deadline, and then you got the agreement coming up, and the Yankees let go of Frazier. Now, Frazier's been up and down. He's had times where he looks like he could be a really good Major League Baseball player. Then he gets hurt or he messes up, and they send him back down to the minors, and they bring him back up. They finally said goodbye to Clint Frazier. What do you think about that, Doc?
All right, I think there's two stories. Well, actually, maybe three things here. One, I think the Yankees from the start with Clint Frazier did a bad job with him. As you said, when they were sending him up, bringing him down, and holding him down when they should have been bringing him up, and I don't think they communicated well with him for a long time. And he was like, why do other guys keep getting called up and not me? I mean, they went out, and he was like the prize of that trade for Andrew Miller,
right,
at the trade deadline. And like, we got this kid, Clint Frazier, who is going to be a superstar. And then they just didn't treat him well. And for whatever reason, in the beginning, the media wanted him to be a villain. They tried to make him out to be a villain, something about, like, I want to wear number 7 because Mickey Mantle wore it. I'm as good as Mickey. I forget what that was all about. That stuff just becomes noise. But I remember that. Like, they were trying to portray him in a bad light. And he's like, what are they doing? Why? Like, what is this all about? So from the beginning, I think there were reasons that people didn't like him, or they were trying to stir up things about him. But then there were the Yankees who just didn't say to him, like, this is what you need to do, and we're going to bring you slowly into the major leagues, and you're going to be a superstar for us. So that was one big problem. The second problem, I think, which is nobody's fault, is he got hurt, and he's had all sorts of issues with his vision and concussions, and he played hard, and he ran into walls, and got injured. And I think that's one of the tragedies of professional sports, right? Like you're just one play, one bad hit away. And I'm not meaning hit. I'm meaning like getting hit or running into something or getting hurt away from your career just fizzling up in smoke. And that's a tragedy. And that's the sad part. And the third part is the Yankees have not been able to do a great job of leveraging their talent that is either going to be their major league talent, or the talent that they can use to trade to go to and acquire other great talent, right? So Clint Frazier had value to the Yankees as their supposed starting left fielder. That could have been him. But once they decided that he wasn't that guy, he still had a ton of value, and the Yankees could have leveraged Clint Frazier to trade for other pieces that could have helped the team, whether alone, because in the beginning he was really highly valued, or as part of a package. And so the Yankees didn't do either of those things. They didn't make it possible for him to succeed at the major leagues, and then they didn't make it possible to leverage his value to help the major league team. So those are really the storylines. I think it's a sad story because I think Clint Frazier could have been, had he not gotten hurt and had he not, had this inconsistent up and down stuff, I think he could have been a very good major leaguer. And I hope he does become a good major leaguer for another franchise.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I got nothing against them. I agree with you. They handled that terribly. The whole situation in Clint Frazier, they handled terribly. Also, Odor was released and Wade was released. Odor, I liked Odor. I thought Odor was a decent second baseman, and he had a little pop in his back. I did like Wade. Wade was a good hard-nosed baseball player. He might not have been a star, but I think he could have been maybe a Bucky Dent or something like that at that level where he could have helped the team. So all of those three players, I know you can't keep everybody, and you got to make moves to try to make your team better and more successful and up with the times. But I'm kind of sad to see Frazier. I'm sad about that situation, and I'm sad about Odor and Wade being left out to dry, kind of, sort of. They do have an agreement coming up, Doc, and this is making everybody kind of a little nervous, right? They're not sure. I would think, now tell me your thoughts on this. I know the baseball players they're going to want to, and the union and the league to a point is going to want to expand the salary cap. But there are going to be some owners that are going to want to put a cap on that salary, especially the teams that don't have a lot of spending money. I think it would be good to have some kind of soft cap to try to equal certain things out. What are your thoughts? What would, if you were, let's do both sides. If you were the owners, what would you be looking for going into this agreement?
Wow. This is the hard stuff for me because I really don't follow the economics. I'm not an economist. You just go by what you hear, right? And if you hear the player's perspective, you hear the owner's perspective, and both sides, in the end, obviously have logical reasons for trying to stand firm in what they want. In a purist sense, now again, this comes from a guy who's a Yankees fan, who, I think I'm brought up in a Yankee era that was probably unlike most fans. If you take fans my age in their early to mid 50s or late 40s or whatever, I'm 53. By the time we became baseball fans and it all started making sense, the Yankees weren't the old-fashioned Yankees who brought up great players like Mickey Mantle and they brought them through their system. Right. They were a team that just went out and bought whoever they wanted and got whoever they wanted, and money didn't matter, and the Yankees just wanted to win. So you want Catfish Hunter? Let's get him. You want Goose Gossage? We'll get him. You want Reggie? We'll get him. And if those guys don't work out, you go get somebody else. And you get Don Gullett and Raleigh Eastwick and Dave Winfield and Ricky Henderson. I mean, on and on. So my perspective from the earliest ages of baseball was, that the Yankees should be getting all the great players. And that sometimes still clouds my decision-making when I'm saying, like, Bryce Harper's available, the Yankees ought to get him. And the Yankees don't operate that way anymore necessarily, at least on a bigger scale. They do sometimes with guys like Garrett Cole. But that's what really is my basis when I think about baseball. Is I would love it to be a free market where the players can get as much as they want. If owners want to, if the Yankees want to spend $500 million, let them spend $500 million. Now I know the perspective on the other side. Well, that makes it unfair. Then the Kansas City Royals can't compete, and then the Baltimore Orioles will never compete, and things like that. So I get it. So there has to be some balance. I'm not keen enough to know what that balance is, but I will say that throughout the history of baseball, even during these last many years, and other sports like the Knicks, I know basketball is a different sport, but the Knicks always tend to outspend all the other teams and they don't win a darn thing. And the Mets always tend to have a high payroll and they don't have they don't win a darn thing. So I think you need to spend big when it's necessary. I mean, the Dodgers spend big and they're always competitive, but they've only won one World Series even, right? So I think I don't want to see a sport where you incentivize not trying to put out the best team. And unfortunately, that's what the Yankees have been doing the last couple of years, saying, well, we'd get this guy, but it would hurt our luxury tax. And we really don't want to go over the luxury tax threshold. So we're not going to put the best possible team we can. And I'd rather see every team try to put out the best team.
Well,
I don't know if that's an answer. Sorry.
I mean, I know, but it's very well explained how you feel about it. And I understand that because I was with the Yankees before that. I was there when they had, they brought up Roy White and Bobby Mercer, and Ron Guidry comes from the farm system. A lot of free agents on those 70 teams. There's no doubt about it. The 90s team's a little different, right? They did have a good mixture, and I think maybe, Doc, you're right. You've got to find that happy medium, right? You got to have where you have a good farm system and you can build through there. But I always thought that free agency, and I don't care what sport it is there to kind of put you over the top, right? It's not to build your team. And I think that's maybe the problem with the Yankees today. I mean, who's a really last good ball player? I mean, you could say Aaron Judge, he's been hurt quite a bit. But besides Aaron Judge, who's a real quality player that they've brought up that could become a star in the league? I'm not sure if there is anyone besides Judge. And Judge has been hurt. But I don't see any pitchers like a Pettit coming up. I don't see any, infielders coming up through the Yankee system that they used to do. And this is what I think a problem is also with the Yankees and other teams like the Yankees, that they go one way or another, right? They either do it, it's all a farm system and they can't afford to, to bring anybody in, and they end up trading their farm system players anyway, or they go all free agency, like you say the Dodgers did. And you said they only won one World Series, and you're right. I mean, they didn't even make it this year. So there's got to be some kind of happy medium. I think for the Yankees, if I was Cashman, just in this situation alone, I got to find those four or five really good players, and I got to bring them up. And maybe I bring them up a little early, and then I put the free agents around them. I don't go out looking for injured free agents and trying to sign them on the cheap, because we know that's not going to work. And as far as baseball goes, I hate to compare it to football because it's two different sports run two different ways. But there is a salary cap in football. And the league is the biggest, most money-making, popular sport in the world. You can even put up against soccer as far as I'm concerned, because when the Super Bowl plays, that's it. That's the number one show in the world. So there's got to be a place where you can put some kind of soft salary cap, not a luxury tax. I mean, this is the cap, and it can adjust as the year goes along for some reason or another. It can be worked in where the Dodgers can't go out and buy everybody. So, I mean, there's got to be something there that they can work on, Doc. I mean, even basketball, believe it or not, has a salary cap. It's not worth anything. But hockey and football, that are both very competitive amongst the teams, have that salary cap. And I think it would be good for the sport that you're not paying one guy $25 million for 1 year. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's crazy. Or paying somebody, $300 million for 10 or 12 years. I think that's ridiculous too. That's just not right. So there's got to be some way, and I don't think that they'll be able to do it, honestly. I really don't. But there's got to be somewhere they can implement something that works out for the smaller teams. But as far as specifically as the Yanks go, they've got to. With Frazier is a great example, right? We just talked about Frazier, a guy that you could bring up that could be a star. You've got to take these people like they did with Jeter, like they did with Williams, and you've got to develop them into ball players, and faster rather than later, and then get them free agents. Then bring in your Tito Martinez's, then bring in Paul O'Neill's. And then that's the key, I think, for any team to be successful, especially the Yankees.
Yeah, I think we're saying this basically the same thing, and using your young talent to get the other pieces like O'Neill and Tino. They came through trades. The Yankees traded Chuck Knobloch. Right. The Yankees gave up a highly touted lefty, Eric Milton, who pitched okay for a couple of years for the Twins. He wasn't bad, but you say like, we have this pitcher. We really need a leadoff hitter. We need a second baseman. Chuck Knobloch can be had. That's the guy we're going to go out and get, and he's going to add a new dimension to our offense. And he did, right? He had a couple of good years for the Yankees. Like that's what Clint Frazier. Once the Yankees decided that he wasn't the guy, and before he got hurt, the Yankees should have used him as that piece to go get something else. And they seem to come up lacking in that in recent years. When you make a great trade, if the Yankees were going to go out and trade for whomever, you're going to get rid of somebody who's good. GJ and I were talking last Monday on the Start Spread of the News show about this great young Yankee prospect who's supposedly going to be the greatest next superstar, Jason Dominguez. But he didn't do great in his first year in professional ball this coming year. Doesn't mean he won't be great. But the Yankees have to look at him carefully. And if you could leverage him and trade him for a superstar or a plus ball player, I think you got to do it. I mean, they traded Roberto Kelly, who was going to be the center fielder, for Paul O'Neill. That's how they got O'Neill. And look, it turned out to be a great trade.
And I think Volpe, if I'm saying it right, Volpe.
Volpe.
I think he's got some promise. And to me, Doc, I'd bring him up. I'd let him work with the team. I'd let him get on the bench. I'd put him in some games and see what he's got. I wouldn't waste him down there too long. I think they do that too. I think they waste their talent down there too long and then they get old in the tooth, and it's 4 years and too many things can happen. I think you should bring up these younger guys that really have that you think have promise, and let them spend time with the team. Let them play a couple innings here or there. Let's see what they can do. They brought Jeter up pretty quick, and I think it was good for him. I think it was good that he came up and played around professionals in the Major League Baseball level and stuff like. I think the Yankees should start doing that a little more anyway. I guess all the cases are unique, but I think in some circumstances, if you think you've got a winner, you bring them up. And speaking of Derek Jeter, Carlos Correa, I don't understand some people. You're out there in the free agent, unless you don't want to play with the Yankees. You're out there in the free market. You're trying to get the best deal you can, and then you're going to insult Derek Jeter, a Yankee legend. What is he thinking, Doc? I mean, really, what is this guy thinking?
I do not want the Yankees to get Carlos Correa for a host of reasons. I wrote a post. It went live yesterday talking about how I would handle shortstop. We don't have to get into all that, but Correa likes being a villain. He likes to be the edgy guy. But when I looked at his statistics, he's a great defensive shortstop. There's no doubt about that. But I think everybody's perception of Correa is that he's this phenomenal hitter, like he's like a superstar hitter. He's a good hitter. He's a very good hitter. He's a very, very, very good hitter. But he's never hit more than 26 homers in a year. I think he's batted, and I know batting average isn't the greatest thing, but he's batted over 280, I think, once in his career. I think Baseball Reference, I'm just doing this by memory, but ballpark says he's going to hit 269 this year with 23 homers and play great defense. Okay, so he's a very good ball player, and he's worth a lot because he can play great defense. But these are not the types of players I want on the Yankees, guys who want to go out and insult other people and say this one wasn't good. And A-Rod was like that. And it was just hard to root for guys like that. If I'm the general manager and I'm trying to build a team, I'm trying to build a team of guys who are good ball players and likable, so the fans can watch them and enjoy them and really like rooting for them. And one of the things about the Yankees of the 90s that made them so fun was like almost all of those guys were rootable. Rootable? You could root for them. I don't know if that's a word, but you could root for them all, right? Like you could love Bernie Williams, you could love Paul O'Neill, you could love Tino and Jeter and all those guys. You just rooted for them and liked them. David Cohn and David Wells and Mariano Rivera, all of them, and even the role players like Darryl Strawberry comes to the Yankees and he becomes a model citizen, and he's a great guy, and you can't help but love Darryl Strawberry and Chili Davis and Tim Raines and even the role players. And Shane Spencer comes up and he's terrific. And that's what I would do. I would try to build a team of guys that you can root for. And I don't think Yankee fans are going to go like, oh, great, now I got to root for Carlos Correa. I don't think they want to. And I don't understand that from his perspective, except if he thinks it makes him edgy and fun and cool and more marketable, why you would just go around insulting other people. That's just not the way to do it.
Especially Derek Jeter, Jack. I mean, if you're going to insult, if you're going to insult one of the Yankee players that, yeah, whatever, man, you're talking about a legend. That's just ridiculous. I don't get it. But anyway, folks.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Anything you can be, I can be greater. Sooner or later, I'm greater than you.
No, you're not.
Yes, I
Yes,
am.
folks. So what you
Yes,
tuned
I
in
am.
for the
Yes, I am.
debate show we have every Saturday. So me and Dr. Paul Semendinger are going to debate some of the topics from the past, current, and even a couple fun ones today. So we should have a little fun doing this. And Doc, I'm going to turn it over to you as I do to Jack every Saturday for the opening here. And the first debate topic we're going to talk about is it more important that a team has a valid starting pitching ace and a good pitching staff, or should it be they have a great closer and a great relief staff? What do you think is more important, Doc?
I think by far it's the starting rotation. And I think that's one of the things that's hurt the Yankees all these last number of years. But again, I just don't want to focus on the Yankees, though that's what I really just want to talk about always. But truth be told, right?
Yeah.
But the Yankees haven't had great starting pitching. They have, and then they got Garrett Cole. Then they had a great starting pitcher, and then guys behind him. But they have had really terrific bullpens, and that bullpen hasn't been able to be the thing to get you over the hump and get you into the World Series. And really, most teams don't do that. When the Royals were really good, they had that lockdown, shutdown bullpen, close it out, and that helped propel them to the World Series and the championship. I believe in the early 90s, I think that was 1990, when the Reds had Dibble and all those guys. I can't think of what they were called, the angry guys or whatever they called
Bad boys.
Nasty boys. Yeah, right? That was a team that was really built around a strong bullpen. But I think by and large, I mean, how many innings did Mariano Rivera throw in a typical year? And I love Mariano Rivera, one of my favorite players of all time. But just as a comparison, he threw 80 innings, 75 innings, and the starting pitcher is going to throw what, 200 innings?
Right.
Now, you're going to say that some of those 200 innings aren't high leverage innings, but they're all important. The first inning is often just as important as the ninth inning. You can't let them score. You can't give up 18 runs in the first inning and then win the game. So, just from a value perspective, you have a couple of top-notch starters. You're getting, 600 innings out of those guys if you have three of them, compared to if you have really three very good relief pitchers who are going to pitch 210 innings, and you have to cover all the innings in a game. So I would definitely, if I were building a team, you obviously need a strong closer. But if I had to invest my energies, I would invest my energies in starting pitching. And my last thought on that is starting pitchers, very good starting pitchers, tend to be very good, or great starting pitchers tend to be great for long periods of time. Like the great pitchers or the very good pitchers are usually, you can pencil them in and say, this guy's going to be a very good starter for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And they're going to be consistently good for that period. Relief pitchers, except for the very rare occasions, the Mariano Riveras of the world, are much more volatile. They have great years. They have down years. They have great years. And they don't have a long history. Most of them of sustaining greatness. So I would think it's easier to find lightning in a bottle and find a guy who could close out a game for a year or a couple of years than it is to find high quality starting pitching. So that's why I would go starters.
If it was 10 years ago, Doc, or maybe even 15 years ago, I would agree with you. And I think a starting pitcher, of course, we've talked before, I think it's very important to have a good starting pitcher, a few good starting pitchers. But which one's more important? If you look at today, I mean, it's changed so much. Let me give you some numbers, right? And these are teams that went to the playoffs and won the World Series. All right, so you talked about Derek Cole, right? He was 16-8, so he lost half as many games as he won. Eovaldi for the Red Sox. That was their ace, supposedly. He was 11-9. The Astros, who went to the World Series also. Greinke was 11-6. The Rays, McClanahan was their best. I mean, they had a couple good pitchers, but that was their best. He was 10-6. And even with the Atlanta Braves, and they talk about their pitching staff, their ace was 14-6. Those aren't really ace numbers as I think of an ace pitcher. An ace pitcher, you can get at least 20 wins out of. That's an ace pitcher. I really don't even see any ace pitchers out there anymore, to be quite honest with you. You have a couple. But if you look at all the teams making the playoffs right now, they're supposedly starting pace, their number one pitcher loses half as many games as he wins. It's not always his fault, of course, right? A lot of times they have the lead and they lose the lead. But if you look at, if you don't have a good relief staff, if you don't have that closer, that ends up giving a certain pitcher some losses also, right? So, and you know who changed that all, Doc, believe it or not, was our own New York Yankees, right? The Yankees are the fault of that. You go all the way back to Casey Stengel, who used to start doing that way back when. And if you go to the 70s and you look at Goose Gossage and Sparky Lyle, even with Ron Guidry having one of the greatest starting pitching seasons of all time, I think it was 25-3 if I'm not mistaken. Without Goose Gossage, I don't know if the Yankees would have made the World Series. So I think your own team, my own team, is the one that started the change in this. Sparky Lyle was tremendous, won the Cy Young one year. He did a lot of relief pitch, and that went on for innings and innings and innings. I think his record was as good as a starting pitcher. And, of course, Goose Gossage would close you down for the most part every time he pitched. And then we got Mariano Rivera. You know, Mario, that was a guarantee. If they beat Mariano Rivera, was because he jammed him and the blooper went over somebody's head, and that's the only way you could beat Mariano Rivera. So, again, I would agree with you if we were talking 10 or 15 years ago. But today it's different. In fact, they'll go to a World Series and just use all relievers now. What do they got, 13, 14 relievers on the team now? I think that you do need very good starting pitching, and you need winning starting pitching. But if you have that one closer, and you mentioned Kansas City Royals, and you mentioned the Cincinnati Reds, and if you got a really good relief staff, you're golden today, especially because there's not great hitters out there like there used to be, right? They're not hitters that they're swinging for the fences. So if you got a good reliever, I mean, you're gonna shut them down. And I think that's why they use them now, because by the time you get to the third time around for a starting pitcher, or today the second time around, if you don't have his stuff, they're jacking them. So I agree, you got to have a good pitching staff, a winning pitching staff. And you spoke about the Mets. The Mets, a couple years back, didn't get in the playoffs because of their reliever. He lost like 20 save opportunities where they would have ended up in the playoffs. It's a different game now, Doc. It's just that not that I'm happy about it, but it's a different game now. And if you don't have that one closer, as we found out with Chapman, who went up and down this year and lost some games for us. If he won some of the games he lost, we would have been in the playoffs no problem. We may not even have been a wild card.
That's true. If Chapman hadn't had that period where he was terrible,
the
Yankees ended up in a tie. That would have been just one of those games if he could have closed them out.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. There's no listen. Even and Carlos brings up a lot of great points here. I mean, you talk about DeGrom. DeGrom is one of the greatest pitchers in the league today when healthy, and his record's 8-9. He can't get out of his own. The Mets can't get out of his way because they can't bring nobody in relief for him. And if I did get Cy Young, I think he was 8-7 or 7-6, or maybe even had a losing record that one year. And he got Cy Young because the Mets had no closers. And it just changed so much now, Doc. It's changed so much. I don't even like it, to tell you the truth. But, you mentioned some of the old relief pitchers. You can go back to Dennis Eckersley, who was a starter with the Red Sox, great relief pitcher. Mariano started out as a starting pitcher too, and became a great relief pitcher. So I think today's game, Doc, if you don't have that one great closer and a great or good to great relief staff, you ain't got a chance to go into the World Series this year, Doc.
It's a fair point.
Well, thank you. Yes. So, Doc, first debate. Very good. You got to warm up, buddy. You got to get ready, man. You got to get
Gotta
ready.
get ready to
Oh, you
get
got to get
angry.
ready because I bring it. I bring it, man. I bring it with you.
All right, I'm still right. You have a good point, but I was still right.
Yes, you were. Okay. So anyway, that was the question for the first one, folks. What do you need today as far as the starting pitcher? And again, you do have to have a good starting pitching staff. They throw most of the innings, or they used to throw most of the innings. I don't even know if they do that anymore. It's crazy because sometimes they only go 4 innings. But anyway, so what I want to talk to you next on our debate thing, I think it's the dimensions. Is that right? Is it dimensions
That's
of the
correct.
ball? Now this is a very interesting one to me, and I know what you're going to say even before you say it. But so the topic is, folks, should baseball have the same dimensions to the outfield wall in every park? Right? I mean, we know that baseball has different dimensions, different parks for different parks. So I'm going to start off with this first by saying, listen, in every sport, every professional sport there is, the dimensions of everything are the same. On a football field, there's 100 yards. The field goal is behind the end zone. In hockey, the rink is all the same size in every arena. The net is not bigger or smaller. The net is the same dimensions. In basketball, right, the courts are all the same size. The nets aren't higher or lower. The nets are all 10 feet, I think it is, from the floor. The only sport that has different dimensions for ballparks is baseball. Now, I know this goes back way into the past, and I know it's unique and it's great, it's history. But listen, you want to talk about home field advantage. If you use it correctly, like the Yankees haven't, you want to talk about home field advantage. Normally, home field advantage is when you're going away, right? And you got the advantage because you get to stay home. The other team visits you. They can't see their family. They can't go home. They travel wherever they got to do across the country, down the street, wherever. They got to stay in a hotel. They can't see their kids. They can't see their wife or their girlfriend. And then they got to eat in a restaurant together. And then they go into a stadium that's yelling and booing them all the time. And they don't know. Yeah, it's just, that's what they talk about, home field advantage. But in baseball, I'll give the 2 examples of locals here, right? Yankee Stadium. I think it's 3 down the right field line. What is it, 320, Doc? 313, 310?
15? I could look up the dimensions.
And in Fenway Park, and people make a big deal of the Green Monster, I think it's 283 feet down the line. I played in the senior leagues, Doc, and down the line was 330 feet. We had to hit the ball out of I could have hit it out of Yankee Stadium or Fenway Park. It's ridiculous. I wasn't even in college. I was hitting balls out to the fence. So, of course, the Yankees, if they were smart, they would get left-handed hitters. And, of course, all their great power hitters, Garrick, Ruth, Mantle, switch hitting, all their great power hitters were lefties. Reggie Jackson, right? So, when you're building your team in your ballpark, if you have the short field and right field or left field, of course, you're going to want to put big right-handed power on your side in that field, right? So I mean, you got the Jim Rices and you got the Dwight Evans and you got, I could go on and on. This is an unbelievable advantage that no other part. Can you imagine, right? You got a right-handed quarterback, or you have a field goal kicker that can't kick the ball. This is a better example. Can't kick the ball that far. So you're able to move the goalposts up to the beginning of the end zone like they had in the old days. Can you imagine that? No, everybody would be looking at you like baseball. This is right. They do this, and I think it's a high time, Doc, that they even this out, man. Maybe 320 down the line, 375 to the gaps, 400 to the center field. Let's make it fair. Let's make it fair to everybody. Why does Fenway Park get to be 285 or 283 down the left field line, and Yankees get to be 313 down the right field, whatever it is, 310 down the right field line, and the rest of the ballparks are 330 or 340? That's crazy. I know. I was thinking about that when I was watching the game. I'm like, I was in Fenway Park, I was in Yankee Stadium, and I know it was a green. You got to hit it over the Green Monster and everything, and it's great to hit it up. I mean, all the doubles off the wall too. How many doubles wouldn't have been doubles in other stadiums if it wasn't for the Green Monster? How many home runs wouldn't have been home runs for Babe Ruth or Garrick or Mickey Mantle if there wasn't a short porch? I mean, the stats are skewed. The advantage. I mean, why don't we just put it? Didn't Kansas City have a hill somewhere? I think they had a hill to center field and the fountain. I forget. It was crazy, and you had to. I don't know. And then you got Toronto where you got beams. The ball comes off the beam. I mean, baseball's crazy. But I think to start it out, Doc, they should make these even for everybody.
Yeah, so I'll respectfully disagree.
Okay.
Here's what I love about baseball. Well, there's so much, but baseball of all the major sports is the only one that's unique. That has a different. The whole thing is different. It's played on a different type of field. It's played in a different manner. The other sports are all, in my opinion, variations on the same theme. There's a rectangle or an oval, and the team has a ball, and that team somehow has to move that ball across that rectangle or oval and put that ball in a net or in a hoop or across a goal line. And then when you don't, the other team has it and they go the other way and they push back and forth. And sometimes they do it by pushing each other. Sometimes they do it by kicking something and you can't use your hands. Sometimes you do it by using your hands and you can't use your feet. And sometimes you do it on ice. Right.
Yes.
But they're all basic theme variations on the same theme. And then there's baseball. Now, baseball does have a lot of things that are the same. The pitching mound is 60 feet, 6 inches from home plate. The bases are 90 feet apart. But the foul ground is different from park to park. The room between home plate and the backstop is different from park to park. And of course, the outfield fences are different from park to park. And I think that helps make baseball fun and unique and special and wonderful. So if you have a stadium that's tailored to left-handed hitters, what you then have to do is you need to have a pitching staff of really great lefty starters so the other teams don't bring lefty hitters into your stadium. And you need great lefty hitters on your team so you can take advantage of that. If you're the Red Sox, you want to have lefty hitters who can hit the other way, like Wade Boggs, and or right-handed hitters like Jim Rice, Manny Ramirez, who can pound that green monster. And I just think, in my opinion, watching the different games in the different stadium adds a special element. The Red Sox have that crazy triangle out there in center field. I think it was the Astros who had that hill. I think they got rid of it. But every field is unique and fun and different. It makes going to a ballpark that much more fun. Like the Jets and the Giants, they have the same stadium, MetLife. I've been there once. I went to the Meadowlands many times. And it just, when you're going to a Jets game or a Giants game, it doesn't feel any different. And it's just, that's where they're playing. But when you go to Yankee Stadium, it feels different than when you go to Citi Field. And when you go to Citi Field or Yankee Stadium, it feels different than when you go to Camden Yards. Everybody has its own feel. The fans can be closer. The fans can be farther away. I think it adds to the idea that baseball is more, at least in theory. I know they're big time players and they don't interact with fans like they should or could or whatever, but it's more of a community game. We all come out to the ballpark together. Take me out to the ball game. We'll eat some hot dogs and Cracker Jacks and have a grand old time. That's all the appeal of baseball. And I love the fact that when teams have the stadiums that they play in, that the general manager and the manager have to manage around that. I mean, remember those great Kansas City Royal teams that played the Yankees? Those guys were all really athletic and really fast because they played on AstroTurf and they hit the ball into the gaps in a stadium that it was hard to hit home runs in. So they built that team that way. The early 1980 St. Louis Cardinals did the same thing. They played on that style of baseball on their field. And then other teams play in different ways. The Dodgers used to try to raise the pitching mound higher for Koufax and Drysdale. And as I recall, Sparky Anderson, when he was a manager, used to try to grow the grass higher on the infield to slow down ground balls and things like that. So I love that aspect of the game. I think it makes baseball special. I think it makes it unique, and I think it makes it fun. And I enjoy the different fields. I just think to take that away means that Fenway Park has to be changed, and Wrigley Field has to be changed, and Camden Yards has to be changed, and all these epic and wonderful baseball stadiums. And I wouldn't want them to do that.
I mean, look, I'm doing this in fun to you, and I agree with a lot what you're saying. But then they changed the distance to the walls. I mean, Yankee Stadium, I think it was like 450 feet or 457 feet to left center field. Now and then it went to 430, and now I think it's like 410 or something ridiculous.
Yeah,
Right.
Left center is 399. Center's only 408. Right center's 385. They made Yankee Stadium much more symmetrical than it used to be, and to be honest, I like that less.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the Dodgers coming in Yankee Stadium and Lopez shaking his head every time he hit the left center because it would have been out in the Dodger Stadium, but it ain't out in the Yankee Stadium. I remember that. But if what you're saying is true, which there is a lot of validity to what you're saying, then how can they just change the dimensions of the home run whenever they want? I mean, isn't there any rules at all? This is what I want to know. Is there any rules in baseball about dimensions? I mean, can you bring it into 200 feet if you want?
I think there are minimums, yes.
Okay.
I believe that when teams haven't made those dimensions, that they have to get a waiver or something like that. Like you can't have it at a certain. You can't be too short, and it can't be. I guess it can't be too far away either. But these are the things that teams think about when they're building new ballparks too. Like, what do we want it to look like? And I'm sure you have to have all those plans approved. But there are minimums.
Okay.
I believe the Yankees, though, when they built the new Yankee Stadium, got I'm just digging deep into my memory. I think they got I think the right field line and the left field line are too short, based upon what Major League Baseball says. It's 318 to left. It looks like it's 314 to right now. I think those are under what baseball says a new stadium has to have. But I think because it was Yankee Stadium and there's the history there that they allowed the Yankees to go a little shorter.
They got a special waiver, right? There you go. So
yep.
That's
the Yankee waiver.
The Yankee waiver. All right. So, folks, we're going to go ahead and take our first time out for the show. We'll be back right after these messages. We got a lot of debating to go to, a lot more sports to get to. So stick around with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
McDonald's is our kind of place. It's such a happy place. Happy place. A clean and happy place. McDonald's is our kind of place. It's such a happy place. McDonald's is our kind of place. Your kind of place.
McDonald's believes in getting food to your kids before they get to each other. Such good food, too. McDonald's famous French fries, triple thick creamy shakes, lean beefy cheeseburgers and hamburgers, icy cold soft drinks. And here's a plus, spill-proof lids on all beverages. Another plus, napkins that are big as a bib. Quality, cleanliness, extra care service. That's McDonald's. A total value that's unmatched anywhere.
McDonald's is our kind of place. It's such a happy place. McDonald's is our kind of place.
Your kind of place.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Their ketchup's coming out a lot slower than ours does.
That's not good manners. Oh, you noticed our Heinz. Here, taste it.
Hi, Grandma. Best ketchup I ever tasted.
That's pouring it on a little thick.
Yeah!
Thick, rich Heinz ketchup. The taste.
What's for dinner? Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
Jack is a legendary Hall of Fame boxing rider. Mac spells cat with the letter K. Mac played football and baseball for 10 years, coached football for 12. Jack was the wiffle ball home run king of the neighborhood. Jack was a sparring partner of the middleweight champion of the world, Golden Gloves boxer. Mac still reads cereal boxes at breakfast. Together they form the Sports Odd Couple. Both know sports in every way, but mostly at odds with their commentary and opinion. The Mac and Jack Sports Show, 8 to 10 a.m. on Facebook Live, Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel, Thursday through Sunday. Also on Spotify. Tune in and enjoy the show. This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning. You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Yes, sir. Good morning and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show live Thursday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. You're joining us for our Saturday debate show. Here we have the educated, the humble, one of the smartest men I know when it comes to baseball, especially Yankees baseball. He knows a lot about what's going on in the past, the present. He knows all the ins and outs about the Yankees and does an incredible job over at the Start Spreading the News blog. He's a award-winning author. Scattering the Ashes was his first book that really knocked everybody off their chairs as they read it. It's a great family book that includes marathon running and sports involved in it. And then he wrote The Least Among Them, a great book about the Yankee players that only had one time at back or 1 year with the Yankees.
No, just one game.
One game with the Yankees. So it's a great book. Again, getting rave reviews. So it's a pleasure every Saturday to have Dr. Paul Semendinger on with us. Right now, we're in the middle of a debate. We're talking about a little bit about baseball. We'll talk about other things coming up, right after these. But I do want to get something out of the way. And Doc disagrees with me. And I think they should change the name from MLB MVP to maybe best player, or maybe add another award there. But Doc thinks it's great the way it is, so he's going to tell us why. What do you think, Doc?
Well, I'm a fan of tradition. And the MVP award, I think in general, really means the best player of the year, the player who was the best. When somebody says he was the MVP, they usually say that was the best guy. I think sometimes we get all focused on that word valuable. And then people say, well, if he's valuable, that means he had to be on a team that was winning, because you can't be a most valuable player if your team is in last place, or if you don't make the playoffs. What value did you make for the team? The team didn't win anything. So obviously you can't be an MVP if your team's in last place. And I think that's where the debate comes. Like the people focus on that. But when they made the award, and when they first came up with it, I guess, a long time ago, and when it got its name, the idea was, I think the spirit of the award is that it's for the best player in the league. And by and large, when you say somebody's the MVP, as I said, that usually indicates that they're the best player. So I would hate to see the award name changed, because we have, we're going on 100 years of history now of people being MVPs. And then it just gets, the more we tinker with things, the more blurry everything gets. Instead of clearer, it becomes more blurry. And then the future fans will be like, well, Babe Ruth won the MVP. How come he never won the best player? Yogi Berra won 3 MVPs, but why didn't he ever win the best player award? Well, they didn't have that award. That award came in 2027. So before 2027, the best player was the MVP, but now it's the best player award. And I think it just gets all convoluted. I think it's easier to let it be, keep it as it is, and just then you have those debates every year. And sometimes the writers are going to get it right, and sometimes the writers are going to get it wrong. But I still think I wouldn't change the name of the award to something different, or add another award. They have other awards that people know about that just don't have the same interest that are out there. There are all sorts of other awards that players get, silver sluggers and gold gloves and all these types of things that they don't resonate like the MVP does. And I wouldn't want to see the MVP taken away, the status of being the MVP diminished in some way.
Doc, I agreed with a lot what you said there. But to me, it's confusing because Major League Baseball never really said what that valuable meant. I think it's the reason why it's confusing is because there's no perimeters or no guides or no clear rules on what the MVP really means. What is a valuable player? And I think that it can't be a valuable player if they're not on the winning team. And what I mean by that is you have a most valuable player, say, on the team. I think they do recognize players for that. They do have an offensive rookie of the year, right? So, or the rookie of the year, I should say. That's pretty plain and simple. Who was the best player? Who's the best rookie for that year? You have the Cy Young Award. Sometimes there's a little disagreement, but for the most part, they get it right? They go off the stats. And the Cy Young Award winners, normally the best pitcher, I'd say probably 80% of the time in the league. So there are rules for these other awards. But the most valuable player just kind of sits out there in limbo. What do you mean most valuable? For instance, Ohtani, right? Ohtani's the most popular. He's probably the best player we've seen since Ruth played with the Red Sox because he could pitch and hit home runs and had steals and doubles and scored 100 runs and drove in over 100 RBIs. I mean, the guy's phenomenal. I mean, still pitched 9-2, I think, at a 3.18 ERA. So, I mean, he's one of the best pitchers in the league too, right? I mean, if you go off the ERA at least. But really, what did he do for the Angels? How did he make the Angels better in the Major League Baseball? I think they said it was a replacement of 9 games. So say they won 9 games because of Ohtani, and they would have lost 9 games. They would have ended up in the same position in the division as they did without him. So I think it's Major League Baseball's fault. I think Ernie Banks won it a couple times, and I think they were in last place. A-Rod on the Rangers, and I think they were in last place. I mean, this is where the debate comes. And I don't think there should be really a debate on this. And a valuable player has got to be a player that increased, to me, the team's chances of going farther than what it would have. And that may not be the best player in the league, right? That might be say a Bucky Dent for 1 year, or a average player for 1 year. But most of the time, but for that 1 year, he kicked it in and they went to the playoffs. That would be more valuable to me than Ohtani, as great as he is. And if you look at the last of the league, at Harper, right? Harper, what did really Harper do that another home run power hitter couldn't have done for the Phillies? I think they missed he was maybe more valuable than Ohtani. At least they were in the thick of it at the end of the year. So I don't really understand the valuable part of it, Doc. That's all I'm saying. I mean, valuable to Major League Baseball. Ohtani was valuable to Major League Baseball, right? People went out to see him play. So I could understand it. But then say that, hey, the reason why Ohtani was the most valuable player is because people actually went to the stadium just to watch him play, like they did with Babe Ruth and Garrick and Ted Williams and people like that. Then say that. Why can't Major League Baseball come out and define what that award is? Then there wouldn't be a debate.
But you know what?
What?
The fact that there is the debate creates interest.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But I mean, I still want to know what valuable means. I still want to know. I mean, I want to know what they mean by valuable. To what? And it's like the Hall of Fame balloting, right? You don't know who's voting for who, and then why they're voting, and what their names are. And I mean, it's top secret, and it's like the nuclear, the warheads thing. You can't tell anybody anything. But I just wish, Doc, that they would come out and just say, "Hey, listen, this is why this guy was the most valuable player," and then we could at least there would be a consensus, not even an agreement, maybe a consensus. We can argue whether they're right or not. But at least let's know what their term of valuable means. And that's all I want. That's all I want. I'm not asking for a lot, Doc. I'm not asking for the world. I just want to know what in their eyes is valuable. And then we could get together and we could debate whether he was the most valuable player of the league or not. And that's the only thing that bothers me about it. And
I get that. And I understand that. And I think that's been part of the problem is people focus on the word value.
Right.
And when you do, then that brings up all these questions. So maybe the question is, should they have ever called it the MVP? Maybe they should have called it just the Best Player of the Year award.
Right, the Player of the Year award or something, right?
Yeah, and then you wouldn't have this debate.
What do you think? What do you think about the pitchers getting the Most Valuable Player award? What's your opinion on that?
Well, in the beginning of the show, we talked about how your youth years skew the way you look at things, right? So in 1978, Ron Guidry went 25-3. I think his ERA was like 1.79, something like that. And Jim Rice had a great year, 400 total bases or whatever. It was just a crazy year. And I thought Ron Guidry should be the MVP. He was a Yankee, and I want the Yankees to win the awards. Obviously, I was 10 or 11 or whatever. I guess I was 10. And I thought Ron Guidry should be the MVP. And they gave it to the Red Sox. So that annoyed me. I didn't really know much about it because I was 10. But then 8 years later, I think it was 1986, Don Mattingly has this great offensive year. It was just crazy. And Roger Clemens has a great year as a pitcher. And I think, well, they give it to the hitter if the hitter has the great year, and they don't give it to the pitcher if the pitcher's the great year. And then, son of a gun, they gave the darn award to Roger Clemens. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So I don't, in general, I remember 1984, Willie Hernandez as a relief pitcher won the MVP in the American League. In 81, I think it was Raleigh Fingers as a relief pitcher. I think sometimes voters get a little ahead of themselves and a little too cute or something like that. And they give it to people that otherwise maybe shouldn't have had it or something like that. By and large, I think the Cy Young Award should be left for the pitchers and use the MVP for the hitters. And that would clean it up a bit. The thing about the MVP that I think becomes part of the bigger question is it's not a defined award as we've been talking about. and it's not applied the same way from year to year as we've talked about.
Agree.
And yet then when it comes down to choosing a player's candidacy for the Hall of Fame, the writers argue based upon, well, oftentimes they do, based upon how many awards a player won or their lack of awards, as a way of saying, well, he doesn't deserve to go in the Hall of Fame because of X, Y, or Z. Now, it's interesting. Greg Nettles was my favorite player of all time, and I would have to go back and double and triple check this, but I believe in 1971, the player in the American League, they didn't have the statistic back then, but the guy who led the American League in WAR, which is a numerical way to determine who is the best player in the league, and a lot of people use WAR now to choose their MVP votes, was Greg Nettles.
Right.
And I believe in 1976, Nettles was number 2 in the league, and he was higher than Thurman Munson, who I also love, another Yankee, who did get the MVP. But if the writers in 1971 and 1976 had given more consideration to Greg Nettles, maybe he gets one MVP and he's the runner-up another year, does that change his Hall of Fame chances? If Don Mattingly had won an MVP instead of, like, I think Kirby Puckett might have won one, or if Ron Guidry has an MVP to go along with the Cy Young Award, when they say, well, he never won an MVP, so why should he be in the Hall of Fame? Or he won this many MVPs, so he should be in the Hall of Fame. Right. I think that's when it gets really messy, is they start equating the MVP for meaning that you were a great player or not a great player in a specific year or in a specific time. Derek Jeter never won an MVP. He was robbed, I think, a couple of times, but he never won an MVP. That doesn't mean he wasn't a great player.
Right. Oh, I agree with that. And it all comes down to opinion anyway. You can put all the stats you want in front of anybody, and you could read stats different ways on different days if you want. Really, I mean, I know they got the OPS in the WAR now, but even that, Doc. I mean, if somebody just don't like you, and I know that's happened. If some people just don't like you, they won't vote for you, and it's just crazy. I think there should be different committees for different things, and that we know who they are and what their background is. I think that should be one of the things to be on one of these committees to do any of this voting. Because if you just say, well, a bunch of players voted for him or this, but well, who was the player that voted for him? Did the player have a problem with this guy, right? Did he get in a fight with him on the field? I think it should be known. And they say a lot about, well, then people could call and influence you or try to threaten you. Or listen, if you want to be on this committee, you're gonna have to put up with that nonsense. But I mean, if this player, this umpire, this writer has a problem with anybody of these guys that are on there, they may vote against them. And then even if, especially if it's close with another player in their opinion, and that's the thing that kind of drives me crazy too, is that there's no accountability in this voting either, which kind of bothers me too. So that's their third topic. So we're moving right along here, Doc. This might be.
No, we're doing great.
Yeah.
Jack who?
Yeah, Jack who? Who is this guy that used to be on? Yes, I've had other co-hosts on, and they've contacted me off there just to let Jack know.
We love Jack.
We do. Jack's one of my best friends. So Doc loves the Rocky movies, and even Jack have tried to put pressure on me to get a debate going.
Jack's going to be very upset that we're doing Rocky without him.
Hey, listen. He goes to Vegas. I get to do what I want, right? So, and this is no dig at Jack at all. Trust me. But in the Rocky films, what interests me about Rocky films, and I like the first one and probably Balboa, the last one, the best of all the Rocky movies, because to me they have great storylines. It's not just him fighting somebody from Russia or a bully from the neighborhood. There's a lot of stories in there, and Rocky 1, to me, is really good because of the storylines. And there are a bunch of hidden storylines in there if you follow it. It's not just him going down and beating up, the half cows in the warehouse and then fighting this guy he has no business fighting. There's a lot of storylines in there. I get to go first, and I think Doc will appreciate this because it's kind of unique from what I've always heard. But this has always been my favorite storyline in Rocky. So again, there's a bunch of storylines. He gets a lottery. This ham and egg fighter gets to fight for the world championship because the champion can't find the other guy drops out, which really never happens in boxing. You can look at the manager / trainer, Mickey, never really getting a shot to manage somebody. And, he ends up managing Rocky, and it's just his last chance because he's old in age and stuff like that. But the best storyline, to my opinion, was between him and Adrian. And, they're both kind of similar in a lot of ways, right? Rocky is kind of shy, and he's kind of, he's street, but he's not, he's just a guy that's not going anywhere. And Adrian is the same way. She's a shy young woman, single. She's like in her late 20s or early 30s, and she's working in a pet store. And she's taking care. She's living with her brother, a kind of an alcoholic guy who abuses her verbally, and she's kind of, playing mother to him, taking care of him, and they meet each other. And these two people that are kind of opposite in one way are very much the same in the other, right? I mean, they're both really not going anywhere in life. They're just kind of hanging out, and one's collecting for a mob guy, Rocky, and the other one's working in a pet store and trying to make, ends meet there. So they get together, and it takes almost an act of God. The brother forces her to go out with Rocky, and Rocky brings her back to the apartment, and she wants to leave, and he don't want her to go, and he starts courting her, going down to the pet store and buying things from her to be around her, takes her ice skating, and he can't ice skate. I mean, it's kind of amusing. But these two people get together, and they do it. He has a chance to fight for the championship, and she's there supporting him all the way through. And now she's kind of telling Paulie to back the heck off, and Rocky's kind of telling his old buddies, hey, I don't want to be around you anymore. I got to do this. And they put themselves together. And when they fight, who's the first person he says? Who's the first thing that comes out of his mouth after the fight, right? He yells out, Adrian, because he drew from her strength, and she kind of drew from his strength. And to me, Doc, that's almost a romantic novel, right? I mean, it's pretty cool. That was one of my favorite storylines about the Rocky movie.
Well, I have to agree. And when you mentioned the last Rocky movie, Rocky Balboa, part of the wonder of that movie is the fact that it's Rocky post Adrian, right? And he's dealing with the sadness of being alone, because Adrian really becomes his life. She turns his life around. He gets the chance to fight for the championship and all that kind of stuff. But it's really the love of Adrian that carries him through the whole rest of the Rocky saga and that whole movie. It's absolutely positively a love story. And if you look at some of the early posters of the movie, it's less about a fighter and pictures of fighting. It's like a lot of the pictures are Rocky and Adrian together. And like the one iconic scene of Rocky, I think with the boxing glove holding Adrian's hand, and the picture taken, as they're walking away or from the back. So absolutely. And some of the best lines, I was trying to write some of them down as you were talking, when they're ice skating and Adrian asked him why he wants to be a fighter. And he said, something like, my mom said that I didn't have much of a brain, so she said I better develop my body. And she said, oh, my mom said the opposite. And he's like, well, what'd she say? What'd she say the opposite? That I wasn't born with much of a body, so I better develop my brain. And
right.
It's just, and then he says, hey, you've got gaps, I've got gaps. Together we fill gaps.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah.
And
you
gotta love it. He goes into the pet store, and he wants to walk her home, and she's very shy. And then of course Paulie sets it up that he comes over on Thanksgiving. So absolutely. I think you hit a lot of the other great ideas. This idea of friendship. He stays with Paulie throughout the whole thing, because even though Paulie has all sorts of problems and he is an alcoholic and he has, he's not the easiest guy to get along with, that Rocky stands by his friend. And no matter how great Rocky became throughout the whole series, Paulie was always a big part of it all, and he was always there with him. And then there's the story of Rocky and Mick. And there's the iconic scene when Mickey finally goes and, in the beginning, all Mickey does is give him a hard time, right?
Right.
You're a tomato, you could have been great, but you became a 2-bit leg breaker for a loan shark or whatever he says, right? Like that's great. You got to love it. He loses his locker. He puts him on Skid Row. And, but then Rocky gets the chance and Mickey swallows his pride and goes to visit Rocky in his apartment. And then Rocky starts, yelling at him. At least you had a prime, Mick. And he bangs. And, but then Rocky realizes that he was a bad guy. See, I think the thing that makes Rocky such a great character is he's a human being and he has true emotions and he's not a good guy. He's breaks people's legs and arms and fingers. He he doesn't break the guy's thumb, but he's supposed to. He works for a loan shark. He's an enforcer. But underneath that all, he lets the one guy get off and then he gets in trouble for that. He walks the little girl home, little Marie, trying to give her advice. And he realizes he shouldn't have yelled at Mickey. So he then runs down the stairs and he befriends him again, and Mickey becomes his father figure. So I think the character of Rocky Balboa is a good and decent guy, and the lesson there and the message is that don't look at the surface of a person, look at what's inside, look what's deep inside their heart. And so I think those are all great messages. But the one that carries me through most of all is the most obvious. This idea that through hard work and through determination and sometimes through luck, but through hard work and determination, you can be anything you want to be. And it's just all about hard work. Rocky, nobody was going to work out Rocky. No one is ever going to do that. Once he finally gets his mind focused on what he has to do, he does it all. And like throughout all the training, all the movies, Rocky's always doing it a little bit differently because Mickey's like the old school. So Rocky doesn't have the highest tech equipment. He has to work out like the old school way. And he runs through the town. I probably wouldn't be a marathoner if I think deep and hard about it, if it weren't for Rocky, right? Because Rocky was the guy who, when I'm a kid growing up and I want to get into shape, I wasn't a big, strong kid. I was the littlest kid in the grade. So I don't know how much any amount of weights would have done anything for me, though I tried. And I got a punching bag because I had to get a punching bag, and I hung it in my basement because I wanted to be Rocky. But what was the one thing that anybody could do that Rocky could do? Run. So I started running. And, I've run ever since. I've, on and off, but mostly on for the last 20 years or so. But probably if they never had those Rocky running scenes, maybe I would have never even thought about running. But who knows? But that's the message that I take from it. I get inspired sometimes when I'm running, preparing for marathons, or I'm working out or whatever. It's not that big of a stretch to see me finding a Rocky film and putting on the workout scenes, getting pumped up as Rocky starts lifting things and carrying things and doing pull-ups and sit-ups, and Mickey's yelling at him. And it's that's the message I love the most is this idea that you can overcome anything, and through hard work and determination, you can make yourself successful.
The great thing about sport movies, and they all basically are the same, right? They normally it's either a disheartened player or coach or athlete, and they get their one shot at doing something, or they shouldn't have the shot, and all of a sudden it happens where they get the shot, right? And then even to the Bad News Bears and to all these movies are about there's always these, I don't say hidden, they're right in front of you. But, a lot of people don't look deep, especially the first time in the movie. The Bad News Bears is just about, a drunk guy that kind of, puts together this little league team, and his daughter, or I think it was his daughter or his niece, they need a coach, and this guy was an old time ball player, and he's drinking beer. But near the end of this, always at the end of whatever movie it is, right, this guy kind of straightens out, or this athlete straightens out, and becomes kind of what they were, what they want to be. And that's the cool thing about sports movies, right? That it shows, like you're saying, anybody, if they put enough determination and hard work in anything, or anybody that really starts paying attention to what they're doing and starts taking it to heart a little bit, can be really good. And that's what's cool about sports movies, Doc, I think,
Yeah, and so many. You're making me think of like all my favorites. It's a connection that, like even Field of Dreams, right? It's the connection between the father and the son. That's right. Just a phenomenal movie. I'm thinking of Remember the Titans. I absolutely adore that movie. That movie is just fantastic. Hoosiers. I just watched that the last half of it a couple of weeks ago. I was flipping the channels and Hoosiers was on. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good film. That's the same idea, right? The guy who overcomes the sordid past and he leads the kids to a championship. Yeah, it's, I think of all of them, nothing compares to Rocky because there's just something about that character that hits me right here. I somehow on a very personal level, I relate to Rocky and. Very different. I'm nothing like him, but like you can make a connection, and I think that's the idea. That's what a great book does. That's what a great movie does. It makes the people watching it make a connection with that character for whatever. No
matter how different they are, I agree.
Correct.
It just shows we're all the same, really deep down, right?
Correct.
So, folks, we'll be right back after this message. We still got one debate to go to, and this is one of Doc's all-time. He's not the biggest NFL fan, but he does have.
I'm wearing the shirt just for this debate.
I know you did. So we're going to discuss a little bit about the great John Riggins. Just came up with the Jets, ended up with the Redskins, became a Super Bowl champion, Hall of Famer. But you know what would have happened if he stayed with the Jets? Well, we're going to talk about that right after these messages, folks. So please stick with us.
Chock full of nuts is that heavenly coffee. Heavenly coffee, heavenly coffee. Chock full of nuts is that heavenly coffee. Better coffee than
You probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
When the job is done, this guy'll be ready to dig into something mighty good to eat.
How do you handle a hungry man? The manhandlers.
One of the manhandlers is Campbell's vegetable beef. Gets a man-sized supper off to a good hot start. Good.
The manhandlers. Talking, they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed. Yeah, well, Kyle's not here. How come? Kicked off the team. Didn't Sam tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's the first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I've made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admitted to it, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
One stop, turn it up, tune in. You want football? Well, Northeast Streaming Sports has football. You follow baseball? We got your baseball right here. You say you love boxing? We got the best boxing show on the air. You enjoy watching and following wrestling? We got wrestling. You like coverage of your teams? Well, we got that. You want live sports? We got live action. We got the biggest sports stars and personalities on the air. You want good, entertaining, informative sports shows? We got them too. 15 shows in all. We got what you want. We're not ESPN. We're not Fox Sports. We're not even CBS Sports. We're your personal sports network. We're NESSP, Northeast Streaming Sports, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram, iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, and Pandora under Sports Podcasts. We got what you want. We're Northeast Streaming Sports. This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, our Saturday debate show here on the Mac and Jack Sports Show on YouTube, Mac Sports Facebook page. We're all over the place, Doc. We're just all over the place. And that, Doc, is Dr. Paul Semendinger, an unbelievable writer, and also does his own show here on Northeast Streaming Sports every Monday. Called Start Spreading the News, where him and Dr. E.J. Fagan look at all Yankees, and they also cover some of the Major League Baseball news too. Have some great guests. Last show was tremendous with their guest Trey Levy. If I remember,
Tevy Troy.
Sorry, Tevy Troy. That's right, Tevy Troy. Really, Troy. That's an interesting last name. But he was very knowledgeable as a former White House staffer and a big Yankee fan, and wrote some books that he kind of throws baseball involved in. A very interesting man, very entertaining too. He was a great guest, and I know they'll have another one coming up soon. Monday, who's your guest again, Doc, so the viewers know?
Oh, all right. So I have to just check our schedule here.
Yes, you do.
Give me a moment.
Go right ahead.
This coming Monday, we will have Dan Joseph, who's a writer. He's written a number of books, one about the 1993 baseball season. And his newest book is about Pete Reiser, who was a great ball player who came up with the Brooklyn Dodgers and was being compared to Joe DiMaggio, but he got hurt. It's really, I was going to mention this earlier, it's a similar story in a way to Clint Frazier. But Pete Reiser was going to be a great player, ran into the wall, and that sort of derailed his career. And we're going to get into what could have been and what was in the history of the Brooklyn Dodgers and Pete Reiser with Dan Joseph. So that should be great.
And just so you people can see that the people watching and following it right now, again, this is every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern after Glove Fist, Jack's show, a boxer with Frank Tirzo. So here's a quick promo of that.
It just might be the greatest sports franchise in the history of sports. A place where legends are made, and there's always something to talk about. Get ready to immerse yourself in pinstripes. Start Spreading the News, hosted by Paul Semendinger and E.J. Fagan, a couple of doctors with a prescription for Yankee fever. And now, here's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Get ready.
Get ready to start spreading the news. So both doctors come in, both have degrees in education and are great at covering the Yankees. So, folks, Monday night, check them out right after Glove Fist on Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube channel. Do a hell of a show.
In a couple of weeks, we're actually going to have a real epidemiologist who worked for the National Institutes of Health coming on, talking about his rankings of the greatest baseball players of all time in a brand new book he just published called Baseball Generations.
Excellent. And
so
great.
A real doctor, a medical doctor, not an educational doctor or a PhD like EJ or whatever. It's
We're
going to have a medical doctor from the NIH who's also a huge baseball fan. And Dr. Tevy Troy, of course, is a doctor of, I believe, of history who worked in the White House. So lots of doctors around on the Start Spreading the News show.
I like the way you say or whatever. That was great. Doctor or whatever. There you go. So anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about one of the greatest running backs of all time. Arguably in the top 10, John Riggins started his career with the Jets. A lot of people don't realize that, but he was a very successful running back. He did have a 1,000-yard year with them. very big, strong, and very fast. A lot of people don't realize he ran the 4.40. So he's a heck of an athlete. And he was the mainstay of the Redskins really through their Super Bowl years till he retired. I mean, without him, the Redskins probably would not have gone to the Super Bowl with some of the teams they had, but they had the Hogs in front of them, bunch of big linemen, and they would open huge holes for him. And when he got through a hole, or if he had with somebody one-on-one, he was either going to run you over or run by you, one or the other, and was a fantastic running back for the Redskins. But he did start with the Jets. And we're going to talk about if he did stay with the Jets, would John Riggins still be a Hall of Famer? And Doc, you're up.
Oh, boy. Now, listen, I hope someday we have the opportunity to talk to John Riggins. John Riggins, throughout the show, we've been talking about this idea that, you know, we're influenced by the guys who we first root for, the way we first root when we fall in love with the sport. And in 1982 is when I found football, and I fell in love with football. It was not as long of a lasting love affair as my love affair with the Yankees, because I don't follow football all that closely anymore. But for a little while, I was crazy about football, and I loved the Jets. This is 1982 at the Sack Exchange, and Freeman McNeil and Richard Todd and Gastineau and those guys. But as the year went on, I found myself, you know, watching the Redskins playing and just being mesmerized by this ginormous running back, number 44, John Riggins. And I couldn't get over John Riggins and what he did in those playoffs. So, you know, just basically the strategy of the Redskins in those playoffs was give the ball to Riggins, right? We used to say, like, Riggins left, Riggins right, Riggins up the middle, you know, 3 yards a carry every time. And then, you know, a little pass out to Charlie Brown or the Smurfs and things like that. Joe Theismann was a big part of it. But, you know, Riggins was really that whole team, at least as far as I was concerned. And I was such a big Riggins fan. And when they were playing the Dolphins in that Super Bowl, just after rooting for him week after week after week and watching him do it, I remember when he sit there with the oxygen tank sitting on the bench and, you know, bowing to the fans after the one playoff game. It was just, what a character. He was just so much fun. And when he broke off that run on the 4th and 1 and ran it in for a touchdown, that will always be by far, it can't even compare, my favorite football memory. They gave it to Riggins, and then he breaks the tackle and he just goes all the way. That was the greatest thing ever. So I own one football jersey. It's a Jets jersey. It's Riggins. And he is my favorite player. He will always be my favorite player. One day I'd love to shake his hand and just thank him for being great and being such a great running back. All that being said, I don't think John Riggins would be in the Hall of Fame if not for what he did with the Redskins and if not for what he did with the Redskins in that postseason. And then the year after, too, he helped them, I think, get back to the Super Bowl. And then, what was the guy? Marcus Allen, right, on the Raiders, who actually then had a longer run. I was so upset. Riggins' record lasted for like a year. And Marcus Allen, I was like, you got to be kidding me. But I think Riggins, we were talking about MVPs and Hall of Fames and things like this. And I think baseball, when they pick their Hall of Fames, they focus a lot on career value. In order to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame, you have to be a great, great, great player over a career. That's how a guy like Don Mattingly, who was great for a short period of time, doesn't get in. That's how a guy like Roger Maris, who sets a big record for home runs in a season, doesn't get in. But that's how a guy who is great over a long period, you know, and there's always exceptions like Sandy Koufax, who is just otherworldly or whatever. But you usually have to have a large body of work in order to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame. In football, it seems like they romanticize, which is kind of funny because baseball usually is the more romantic of the sports, I think. But in football, they seem to romanticize the players and the moments a little more than baseball does. And you can have some great epic moments, and that can propel you with good enough stats to get into the Football Hall of Fame. So John Riggins twice led the league in touchdowns in 1983 and 1984. He never led the league in rushing. He once led the league in carries. He had 177 carries in 1982. He didn't have great yards per carry. He didn't catch a lot of balls out of the backfield. 4 times, I think. 5 times he rushed for 1,000 yards, 75, 78, 79, 83, and 84. So he was a very good running back. I don't think he was great. I think what makes him great was that Super Bowl and that postseason in 1982 into 83, I guess. And when you look like on Football Reference and you compare, or they compare Riggins to the other great running backs, here's the 10 names that are on the list. Ernest Biner, he's not in the Hall of Fame. LaShawn McCoy, he's not in the Hall of Fame. Matt Forte, he's not in the Hall of Fame. Frank Gore, he's not. Then there's Jerome Bettis, very similar type of runner, big guy, he's in. Franco Harris, another big guy, he's in. Now, I don't know Franco Harris's statistics well enough, but I would think that part of the reason Franco Harris is in the Hall of Fame is the immaculate reception and plays like that. Like he became iconic through the postseason as well, as did Bettis. He had a big postseason Super Bowl, the bust. They gave the ball to him a lot. And then the other 4 guys are Herschel Walker, Fred Tavor, Otis Anderson, and Warwick Dunn. I hadn't heard of 2 of those guys. But only the 2 guys in the Hall of Fame were the Steelers, Bettis and Harris. The other guys are not Hall of Famers. So those are the guys that Football Reference says are most like Riggins, which leads me to believe that if only 2 out of 10 guys who had a career similar to John Riggins aren't in the Hall of Fame, Riggins probably isn't, outside of that postseason run with the Redskins, a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Riggins he played for 11 seasons, and he's one of the oldest players to have a lot of records, Doc. I mean, he's the oldest player to have 300 rushing attempts in a season, 35. The oldest player to have 1,200 yards rushing in a season at age 35. The oldest player to have 10-plus rushing touchdowns in a season at 35. And at 34, he had 1,300 yards rushing. He played for the Redskins quite a long time. At 36, he was still running with the football. So he was very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very durable. And even though the Redskins had an unbelievable offensive line, I think they have a few of their guys from that offensive line in the Hall of Fame also. Very successful during the playoffs. John Riggins was on the big stage, and he was kind of like your average guy. I mean, he wasn't like some a diva or anything like that. I remember him playing against the Giants, and he was to stop Riggins. If you stop Washington's running game, you normally stop Washington. In the Super Bowl, they had some really successful quarterbacks throwing the ball, but he was that guy that averaged almost 4 yards per carry. And that's, if you think about it, to average 4 yards a carry over your entire career is unbelievable, really, because you hand it off to him twice, you're 3rd and 2, and if you hand it off to him the 3rd time, you got your first down. So Riggins was a pounding guy, like you said, but did have speed and used that speed once in a while to break those long ones. I think there's a possibility that he still could have been a Hall of Fame with the Jets, as Barry Sanders never. I don't think they ever maybe won one playoff game, and I don't think he's as good as Barry Sanders was. But there are players that do make the Hall of Fame without being on a winning teams. Riggins was, like I said, durable. The Jets, I guess, would have had to maybe made more of an investment in their offensive line. But you mentioned what I was going to mention. They did have some great teams in their early 80s, up to 86. They almost made the championship game. And if Riggins was still playing with them, he would have been part of some of those big teams the Jets had. So with that defense, and if if the Jets could have run the ball successfully, I think John Riggins had a legitimate shot of being in the Super Bowl. I think maybe if the Jets had a John Riggins back in 83, 84, maybe 85, they might have had a shot to maybe going to the Super Bowl or at least going to the championship. But I'm not sure. I wanted to throw that out to see what you thought. I think with his durability, with some of the teams the Jets had after he left, he might have had a shot.
No,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Doc.
I was just going to say, you make a great point about, could you imagine if there was a backfield of John Riggins and Freeman McNeil? Oh, my goodness.
Wouldn't that have been something?
And the Jets, I don't know football like I know baseball, where I can just pretty much remember everything in years and stuff like that. But I believe it was 83 or 82 was right in that period when the Jets were either one win away or 2 wins away. I think they were in the championship game against the Dolphins. And it was that Mud Bowl game, right? And Richard Todd, I believe, threw all those interceptions to A.J. Dewey. That might have been the year that the Dolphins then went to play the Redskins in the Super Bowl. That might have all been the same
possible.
year.
Very possible.
And
I know they played in the mud against the Browns. The Giants went to the Super Bowl in 85, the 86 Super Bowl, that season. They went the 86 season, sorry, it would have been 87, February 87. And the Jets just missed. They lost to the Broncos that year, who the Giants played. And if Riggins was with the Jets at that time in that Mud Bowl you're talking about, the same thing with the Browns. If they had a serious running attack, they might have ended up facing the Giants in the Super Bowl. That would have been something. You imagine, the Giants, instead of playing against the Redskins all those times for playoffs and stuff, would have ended up playing against the Jets, who Riggins might have been on. So there's a chance.
Because in that game, I'm looking it up. It was the 82 AFC Championship. So I think that was the same year that then the Dolphins won that game and then went off to play the Redskins in the Super Bowl.
Right.
The Jets lost that game because they couldn't get any leverage on the ground. And Richard Todd, as I believe, was forced to throw it a lot. And they kept throwing those interceptions. But if they had Riggins and you had a big guy who could just grind it out on the ground, maybe the Jets win that game and then the Jets go to the Super Bowl. So you make a great point.
There's a couple chances the Jets had if they had Riggins there in the backfield. I'm not taking away from nothing from Freeman McNeil, but he was no John Riggins. I'm telling you that straight up. McNeil was a very good back, but he wasn't the caliber of John Riggins. If they did have John Riggins as their first option, a couple times, Doc, the Jets were close. And if Riggins was there and he could have been a difference maker, and you never know, right? So maybe, just maybe, Riggins could have made the Hall of Fame if he's with the Jets, and those two Jet teams ended up going to the Super Bowl. You never know.
I think that's a great point. I'd love to know, and I just can't find it quickly enough, what Freeman McNeil's numbers were, because Riggins was a grinder, right? So in that Mud Bowl game, Riggins, I think, would have had a good enough game. You just give the ball to him, and he pushes that line right through. Mud wouldn't have really impacted his game as much as a guy like Freeman McNeil, who needed to get to the outside and use his speed in order to gain a lot of yards. And as I recall, he did not have a good game, McNeil, that day, because his was more of a finesse type of running, and he couldn't be as athletic on a field where you kept slipping, where Riggins was just a grind it out and pound right up the middle guy, and he didn't have to be as finesse. He just would have kept pushing that line forward. So I love that alternative history. I love it.
Yeah. It might have worked, Doc. As you said, McNeil was more of a slasher cutter, where Riggins was more of a twister and more of a power runner. So it could have really made a difference for the Jets, and maybe would have brought Jets to another Super Bowl. Who knows, right? You never know on things like this. It's really interesting. So, folks, that's it for the Mac and Jack debate show with guest host Dr. Paul Semendinger. We're cutting a little early today, which is fine because we debated everything we wanted debated. And Doc with some great points, and I tried to stay with them, folks. So, I always do my best. So I want to thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow, don't forget the Big Football Show. We're killing it on YouTube over there with that show right now, where we have our co-host, the great two-time Super Bowl legend himself for the Dallas Cowboys, probably the best defensive end in Dallas Cowboy history. Jim Jeffco comes on with us. We have Keith Angle with the Patriots preview. We have Robert Butler, very opinionated, well thought out sports commentator from Sports Scope. We have the Jetman on there now, Doc. The Jetman comes on and does his preview of the Jets every Sunday. So we got the Patriots, the Jets, and we also got Jamie Pags, the Philly sports guy himself, comes on and gives us our Philly update. And then me, if Jack's with us, Jack and Jim break down all the NFL games. A lot of participation, a lot of people come and watch it. So it's a great show. So join us tomorrow from 8 to 10 a.m. on the Mac, Jack, Jim Big Football Show. Doc, it's been a pleasure.
Always. Thank you.
Can't wait to see you on Monday, and I can't wait to meet that new guest. I'll get in contact with him as soon as I can, maybe right after the show. So have a great one, folks. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow. And don't forget, next week there's Thanksgiving football, and you know I got something planned for Thanksgiving football on the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Again, thanks for tuning in, and have a great